Good afternoon and happy new year, everybody. Kate here from the Safeguarding Association. I'm back for a live on Tuesday. Our Safeguarding Spotlight series returns for 2026. And today's topic is defensible decision making in culture change. And there will be a blog on the website a little later on this week in relation to it. But I wanted to talk about this today because it's something that I've been dealing with a lot in the lead up to Christmas. It's something that I've been dealing with um, after Christmas, and it has so many different areas that it fits into our lives. And often, when we think about culture change, we can think about whole scale institutions that need to have their practice changed. But actually, that's not necessarily what I'm seeing or what I'm going to talk about today, because for me, that culture change is not about anything that is massive necessarily, but it's those small things that you do that allow your culture, your environment to feel safe, to feel supportive, to be um, one where safeguarding is taken seriously and where everybody from the senior leadership team, in whatever guise that looks like, right through to those on the ground and students, know um, what they need to do and know that they are safe within that environment. And sometimes, and I think particularly this term, if we talk about terms, but after any break, there is always a a bit of pushback in terms of all of the groundwork that you've set out since your learners started with you, since you set out your expectations, since you set out the requirements for people being on site. Something happens at Christmas and people go off, they have a lovely time, hopefully, and they come back 2 weeks later and it can feel like you're back at square one. And that is where having that rooted reason for why you do certain things can be really, really important. And it's not necessarily enough to say, because I said so, um, or do as I say, not do as I do, which was often one of my mum's favourite phrases. But it's about thinking around, what are we trying to achieve here? What do we want to happen? What went well? What needs to change? And how do we make that change happen? And importantly, why does it need to change? I think sometimes we can get really swept up in the need for things to alter because that's progress, things that need to develop or change. And often we can forget to really understand why something needs to change. And unless we as leaders know why something has to change, we then can't explain that to our staff and to our learners about why that change is happening. And that's when you get the clashes. That's when you get well, I don't see why that needs to happen. It's all been all right so far. Why we only changed this the other year? Why are we doing it now? Um, or you get the slip back into old practices, old habits, because that why you are doing something isn't necessarily as deeply rooted in the reasoning and the change process. And that's really where the defensible decision bit comes in. It's around understanding, what is the purpose? Why are we changing this particular process, changing this particular situation? Why are we doing it? And does that fit with our values? It does what was happening before fit with our values? Does any of it still fit with our values? Have our values changed? Do we recognize that our values have changed? Um, that's often a good one to have a look at after Christmas, because there is this period where pretty much everybody is out of the building, metaphorically or otherwise. And it can be really interesting when you come back into that space to think about, is everybody still leaning in with our values? Do our values still make sense? Are um, we get very caught up within safeguarding, particularly at this point. We have a rush before Christmas, we have a rush after Christmas, and we're all trying to desperately get through our inbox and desperately trying to make sure that we've answered everything and got everything covered and everything that needs to go on, whilst doing 101 other things as well, because safeguarding leads very rarely are just safeguarding leads. So there'll be other things that you are doing, and it can be really challenging to take that space at this time of the year to really think about whether or not what has happened is still in line with the values and the principles that we've been working under or you've been working under previously. And all of that will feed into what your policies and procedures are. And I have lost count of the number of times where I'm talking to people in the Safeguarding Leaders Hub, we're having one to ones, they're dealing with a really challenging situation. And I say to them, so what does your policy say on this? What's your procedure on this? And they go, well, the procedure is this. Have you followed your procedure? Well, I have, but, or I'm not really sure it fits here. Policies and procedures are the backbone of what you will do. If you want to defend any decision that you are making, then it has to be rooted in your policies and procedures. So if you are changing things that are going to change your policy and procedures, you need to change your policy and procedures first. Get those approved, and then everything else can spiral off that. Um, because if you don't, you end up in this horrible, discordant situation where um, you're trying to drive through a potential, let's say it's a change in so apprenticeship provision, you have new requirements under the apprenticeship framework. So you might be trying to drive through some change for your staff and learners to make sure you're complying with those provisions. It might be that you're trying to change how safeguarding referrals come into the right space. So maybe you're introducing a triage system. You might be thinking about how you are providing assurance to your governors or to your trustees around safeguarding. So maybe you've already got a process in place, maybe that isn't working, or maybe it's been in place for a very long time. And you're now going, well, actually, we probably need to review this and make sure it works. And is it still doing what it was set out to do? Or have we moved on so far that that doesn't seem to work? So all of these things in terms of changes, they don't have to be massive to have an enormous impact. You don't need to immediately set out to change the entirety of the culture, but you can make some really powerful ripples if you've got the right processes in place. If you're really thinking about what it is and why it is you are taking those various steps, then when the challenges come, because let's be really honest, humans hate change. Um, we just don't like it. We don't feel comfortable with it. I've never worked, and I do a lot of work with organizations where there's change happening. And every time there's always this tension between those that are wanting to do the right thing but not really sure how to do it, and those that are absolutely, um, consciously or not, incredibly reluctant to take any of the first steps needed to embed better practice. So, thinking around what what is the change you're trying to make? What is it you're trying to do? What is it that is in place? And then really thinking about how do we make defensible decisions here? And absolutely, you lean on your policies and procedures. So if that's what needs to change, you do that as part of the early stage processes. Um, Make sure you're anchoring things in your values. Make sure that your principles and your values that you will probably have spent a fortune in time and money in compiling actually are sitting right at the heart of what you do. And they're sitting there and are absolutely still relevant to what you are trying to achieve and what you're trying to do. And then the bit where the judgment comes in is, are these steps proportionate? Is what you're trying to achieve um, at the right level? Are you taking enough necessary steps to achieve the outcome you want to? Or are you over egging the pudding, as it were? Does it need a full scale intervention? Does it need wholesale change? Or would one or two tweaks, one or two minor changes actually have a bigger impact and a much more coherent impact and be easily received by those who need to make those changes? So sometimes it might be that you've got to do a wholesale intervention depending on where you're at. I'm certainly working with a local authority at the moment where we're having to do a wholesale intervention. Um, but we're not going in with a wholesale intervention because that way it's far too big. It's like um, the old joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So that the trick with this, I find, is to work out which bits, where are your quick wins, which bits will have the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time, and then making sure that those changes are really rooted in correct decision making. And what have we understood? Where's our evidence for this? What is it that we're leaning on in order to make these changes? What is it we're leaning on to make these um, decisions, to give us the freedom here? And that's not to curtail any innovation, it's not to curtail any freedom, it's not to curtail any processes that are already in place, but it's about making sure that the there is accountability, absolutely, in terms of these changes that are happening, not just from senior leadership, but also from those who are kind of further down the hierarchy, who are going to be doing this on the ground. So being accountable, making sure that the decisions that are being made have robust decision making behind them so that if challenge comes, when challenge comes, you can firmly stand behind those decisions. And if that's the case, if you're accountable and if you've got things that are rooted in proper solid decision making, then you can be quite free with how you innovate, how you implement, how you do various things. So don't think this curtails the safeguarding practice or curtails if you're talking to your other senior leaders and they think, well, you're just trying to stop us doing these various things. You're trying to stop us being all innovative because you've got safeguarding. No, it's not about that at all. It's about making sure that as you're going through this process, that those decisions are robustly defensible and are rooted in your policies and procedures and are also rooted in your values. And if that's the case, then off you go. Go and be innovative. Go and think about how can we change this? How do we make this safer? How do we make this better? How do we um, create something that works in a much better way than what we've currently got? Or how do we go into the global stage and do this and make this into something that it is? So think about, as a takeaway here, as I think about when you're considering any sort of change, whether it's wholesale cultural or whether you're changing little things throughout or resetting, um, maybe stopping people tailgating through the gateways, wearing lanyards, maybe it's reminding them of policies and procedures, maybe it's reminding them of how things are received within the department, all of those kinds of things. Think about, how do you evidence that? And if you are changing things, if you're challenged, how do you evidence your rationale? How do you show your workings out, as it were? And are you documenting the why as well as the what? Because the what is fabulous, But understanding why you're doing something and setting out the why you decided to take that step, why you decided to make that change, or why you stopped doing that particular thing can be really, really powerful. So think about, how do you evidence it? What the decision that's needed? If it's challenged, can you um, show the workings out? And have you documented the why, not just the what? I'm Kate. That's the end of today's Safeguarding Spotlight. If you've got any questions, please feel free to send me an email or send me a message on LinkedIn or the Facebook page. Wherever you are watching this, please feel free to send me a message. If this is something you're grappling with, if this is something that you're currently in the midst of trying to get your head around, or in the throes of trying to sort out and would like some support around it, then come and talk to me and let's have a chat about the Safeguarding Leaders Hub and see if that's the right fit for you. Otherwise, have